Hi and welcome to this week's Wu Wei Wisdom, a life lessons teaching. It's great to be back with you all. You'll notice we are back together, yeah! And we're in a new recording studio. So we hope you still enjoy the video quality if you're watching on YouTube and the audio quality as well if you're listening on our podcast. So this week we are talking all about anger management and how you can control the uncomfortable and debilitating feelings of anger and frustration in your life. So David, let's go right back to Wu Wei Wisdom basics. How would you define anger?
Well, anger for me is a description of an emotional feeling. And so, as you say, it goes right back down to the fundamental principles of Wu Wei Wisdom. You are the creator of your emotions. You are not the victim of them. You cannot be the victim of something that you're creating. Now, just to widen that teaching, please listen, I am not saying you shouldn't create emotions. I'm saying emotions are totally normal, natural, part of us being a human being. But we have to be accountable or take responsibility for creating those emotions. And anger would definitely fall into what I call a red light emotion, a powerful, maybe sometimes a negative emotion. So this is what we're going to be concentrating on this session.
But David, wouldn't you say that anger is always a negative emotion, an unhelpful emotion, or can sometimes be a positive thing?
Absolutely, and that's what I said. If you just go on the red light emotion of anger, you're always the victim to the feeling. And really what I'm trying to coach you and teach you to do is to look deeper. What creates the feeling? What is the belief? What is the thought? And to do that, we do what we call the golden thread process. And the golden thread process is something you can do for yourself. Very easy. It's a process of self-discovery, of self-questioning, asking yourself, why am I creating this feeling? And that's why I dislike the word anger management, because anger management kind of confuses you, because it seems as though you've got to manage the emotion. And I want you to refocus and think about what creates the emotion.
So you're saying don't focus on managing the emotion, focus on managing the source of the emotion. So what you've just said, using the golden thread process, and as in all our teachings, it's about the thoughts and the beliefs within you.
Yes, for me, when I'm working with clients, I prefer to go to the belief. What do you believe? Why do you believe it? And there seems to be a kind of a hierarchical path. First starts with a belief, which can be typically formed in childhood. Around that 6 to 9 year old is very important. And in our model, we call that the inner child, that subconscious part of your mind, that much deeper part that you might want to call your ego or the little devil that sits on the shoulder and talks to you. And I would call that the inner child. And that formulates the belief.
Yeah.
The belief then creates the thoughts. The thoughts then create the reaction to the situation.
David, this all makes sense, but I know that there's going to be a lot of supporters out there listening saying, hold on a minute, you are saying that it's this thing called the inner child that's creating the anger. Well, actually, David, it's not that. It's the person who cut me up on the road this morning. It's my boss because she is just so inconsiderate and so rude and so arrogant. It's my partner because they are so disrespectful.
Oh, those are two or three good examples there. Let's take the boss one. So if your boss is arrogant, overbearing, asking too much from you, yes, you could create an emotion of anger. You can. You could create other emotions. The question is, what is the correct and appropriate emotion for you to deal with that situation? Because it really doesn't matter what emotions that you create. You're not going to change the boss. So it's really about your self-care, and it's really about you addressing the situation authentically And more importantly for me, in your flow. And that's what Wu Wei means, being in your flow. Because there are going to be times in your life when people do cut you up, when bosses are terrible, when your friends don't do what they want. And you can't swing into the emotion of anger every time, because the only one at the end of the day that's suffering is you. It's like drinking poison and expecting somebody else to suffer. They're not suffering from your emotion. That emotion that you're creating, you are the only one that's suffering. And as we said at the beginning of this teaching, that emotion of anger may be the correct emotion, but that's for you to decide. And I want you to be in control to make that decision.
And I guess in personal relationships, though, David, if you are constantly angry, constantly going to the extreme, it does affect other people. It does affect family members, friends, your partner. So, of course, the greatest effect is on you, both physically and emotionally, because anger and frustration over time does have a huge physical impact on our health. But it's a ripple effect. It affects the energy of any relationship dynamic.
That's a really important point there, Alex, because what you're demonstrating there is what we call the pendulum effect. So you're absolutely right. Some people will create an outward anger to try and control the situation and to protect themselves. I'm going to do inverted commas. They see that if they can push people away, if they can make themselves prickly, if they can make themselves difficult, and people will deal with them differently. So they're using the emotion as a kind of a protection or a push away. But the other side of that pendulum, when it swings the other side, a lot of my clients will have this suppressed anger, and they may call it resentment, frustration, but that kind of builds up inside of them, and it causes them so many problems because now that emotion, that repressed emotion, clouds up their thinking and clouds up how they react to situations. So they can look to the surface to other people, very mild, very well-mannered, and then one moment something happened and it's like a volcano that erupts and everybody's surprised and they say, well, I thought Joe was such a calm person, and then they flew out of all proportion. And that is a great demonstration of the emotional pendulum. But the fundamental thing is both of those are not good for you. They're not good for your health. They're not good for your well-being, and they will not be in your flow. And so why we do these teachings is to stop thinking about the two extremes and come into the center. And that's what Wu Wei means, being in your flow, being able to react appropriately, being in control and not allowing the emotions to control you.
When you're in the heat of the moment, though, David, when someone does something very disrespectful or selfish or inappropriate, a lot of people will say, I completely get triggered because I know what's happening is wrong. I then experience or create, I'll take ownership of this, I'm creating a response, which is anger and frustration. And that overwhelms me. It feels hard to control in that moment. As much as I'd like to be calm and zen-like and rational and logical, it's almost impossible in the heat of the moment. What do I do?
Well, what you're just describing there, Alex, is I would say the majority of my clients that come to me, this is what we talk about, because what you just described is not the situation or the stimulus and I liked when you use the word triggered, because I dislike that word immensely. And a lot of my clients will use that word, because if you think about the word trigger, it's almost like you're putting the responsibility for your emotion onto the person or the situation. They're pulling my trigger. Don't let anybody put their finger on your trigger. If you have a trigger, make sure it's your finger is on the trigger. So what you just described perfectly is when we would do the golden thread. Now we would start from the emotion. So if somebody come to me and said, I'm just an angry person, David. If somebody pulls out, I lose it. I slap the steering wheel. My steam comes out of my ears. It ruins my day. Or the other side of the pendulum, I've got this pent up feeling all of the time. I'm looking for unfairness when I'm being discriminated against, when I'm being treated unjustly, and I can just feel my stomach boils and boils like a pressure cooker. I'm just describing a client the other day. She said, it seems to me as though I've got she used the word feel. It feels to me as though I've got a pressure cooker inside of me that's just waiting to explode. And this is where we do the golden thread. And for me, this is where the golden thread can be so powerful, and something you can do for yourself is just asking the why question. So you first start off with the principle, do I create this feeling? And this is a very powerful question. Am I creating this feeling, or is someone else somehow transmitting the anger into my body? That's an important question.
Okay, David, maybe this is a good time to do a little role play on this so we can demonstrate how you can use the golden thread process with the emotion of anger. Okay, so I'm a client who is coming to you and I'm saying I'm experiencing constant headaches. I can't sleep properly at night. I'm tense, I'm wound up, and I know it's related entirely to my workplace, my boss, and how she treats me and disrespects me. And my partner is complaining because I'm always wound up and angry and short-tempered at home, also because of the issues going on in my workplace.
That's well described as in the role play, Alex, because that's normally the type of thing that somebody would come for help, and they've perhaps gone to medication, or they've looked at other things and drinking too much or smoking too much or overeating. So that would be the type of the issue that we would deal with. And my first question is, do you agree that you are creating these emotions?
Well, I've watched some of your teachings, David, and I understand the principle of the emotions being created within me. And I certainly can make the connection between my emotional state and my physical health, my poor sleep, my muscular tension. So, yeah. But
there's no but there.
But the problem is it's my boss. She's the problem.
I see, and that's a great example, Alex, there. And Alex, I know it's difficult for Alex to do the role play. But you see, when she used that but in that description, what she's doing there is she's not being fully accountable. And then what she said, but it's my boss creating your boss is creating the environment. Your boss is creating the stimulus as if you like. But how you react has to be totally down to you. So that's the thing that you can control. This is why this is so important. Please listen to this teaching. You can't control your boss. Your boss may be a very bad boss, not being able to cope with their job, but you can control you. So let's first of all find out what is going on with you. I call it beat the butt. When you ever hear yourself saying, yes, if you're watching this video, and you hear yourself saying, yes, I see where he's coming from, but that means you don't see where I'm coming from and you've not accepted it. So this would go down to accountability and self-responsibility. So do you believe, if you're doing the role play, do you believe that you are the creator of your emotions, not your boss?
Okay, I've listened to what you said. Yes, I'm creating the emotion of anger in response to how I am perceiving how my boss is treating me, but my perception, I believe, is correct. She is not treating me fairly. Okay. And this means I am quite naturally and appropriately getting angry about it.
Okay. Let's say you're right. Your boss is not treating you appropriately as an employee, and we can go down your contract of employment, and we can go down there, but we're not going to do that today. Do you believe being angry, creating anger, is the best response for your boss treating you unfairly?
Well, I guess part of me thinks if I don't get angry, if I just like let it slide and accept the poor treatment, then I'm essentially being a doormat. And I believe I'm worth more than that. And she doesn't value me. Okay. So I guess I'm seeing it as two extremes.
Exactly. I was just going to say, do you see what Alex did then in that role play? She gave me two extremes. Either I've got to get angry or I'm a doormat. See what she just did there in that role play? She gave me the two extremes of the pendulum. Now, what I would try and do on the golden thread now is to say, where is the center of that pendulum? Where is the center, rather than being a doormat or blowing your top? Do you see a center there?
I guess the center is acknowledging that there's something going on, something inappropriate going on here, but that I should acknowledge that there's something wrong here that needs to be addressed and confronted, but that I shouldn't, if I get angry, it's debilitating for me because it means I get emotional, I get extreme, I can't think straight, I can't think clearly, I get tense. And it's almost like I lose my ability to calmly and rationally deal with things, which I know I'm quite capable of doing when I'm not in an extreme emotion. So, yeah,
Okay, so this is where the role play becomes difficult, because in that circumstance, I would say the majority of my clients would then do something very disruptive. They would then blame themselves. Mm-hmm. They would say, here it is. There must be something wrong with me. I'm the one at fault here. And there's where the flick goes. I call it the flip over. Rather than seeing the fault with the boss and her poor technique of handling employees, or she's under stress, or she can't do the job, rather than seeing the position from a balanced Wu Wei position, what I know it's difficult for Alex because she's role playing, but what a lot of my clients would do, I would say the majority of my clients would do, in that instant, they would immediately turn it on themselves and they would say, there's something wrong with me. And they would use what I call the three lies. I'm not good enough. My boss has found out I'm not good enough. Just yesterday, a client says, they'll see through my mask. I said, what mask is this? I can't cope. The boss has realized I can't cope. I'm inadequate. There's something wrong with me again. Or I'm unworthy. I don't deserve this job. I'm imposter syndrome. We've done videos on all of these. Please look in the archives. Now, I know it's difficult for Alex because she's doing the role play, but typically that's where a client would go. They would then turn it on themselves, and then we would go down the golden thread, because that will nearly always be the inner child. What happened to you when you were a child? What is your belief structure? What do you believe? Why you believe it, and why this is so important. You see that we're talking about an anger situation in a modern society with a boss who's not very good, but actually for that client of mine, we're talking about what happened when they were 6, 7, 8, 9, and they were treated unfairly, unjustly, or something happened in their childhood, in their family, at school, something that needs to be resolved on a much deeper level.
So these sort of childhood experiences, like you've just described, childhood traumas, which could be fairly light, shall we say, but still incredibly impactful, all very serious. They can all have a knock-on effect to make us have a greater propensity for getting angry as an adult. Is that what you're saying?
Well, what I'm saying quite clearly is they can contaminate, listen to the word, they contaminate your core beliefs. And so it's like putting on a pair of glasses. If your glasses are clear, you see the world through a clear pair of glasses. But if your glasses are tilted red, as anger, you see everything through that tinted glass. And that's why doing the golden thread, going down to the core beliefs. What do you believe? Why do you believe it? Because if it is typically the inner child, it is almost like a childlike view of the world. It's very narrow. It's almost looking at the world through a pinhole. And in the example that Alice gave us, rather than seeing the inadequacies of the boss to do her job and not treating staff correctly, what happens? It's reversed back onto yourself, and you start blaming yourself, and you go into what I call the carousel of despair. You go round and round. Then everything you see around you is unfair, unjust. Here's some more proof. I think you call it confirmation bias. Yeah. You see everything that proves this negative to yourself, and this is what you have to change. And the beauty about this, it's not for anybody else to change, because it's your belief. There's the power of the teaching. There's the empowerment for you. This is your belief. Nobody else knows. Your boss didn't know you had this belief. Your boss didn't know you came from a dysfunctional family. Your boss didn't know you were bullied at school. Your boss didn't know that people were always what we call CCJ, criticizing, comparing, and being judgmental. But you do. And the power of this is you can change it.
And so, David, this is not to say that what happened to you in childhood or what's happening to you now in terms of the people or the environment you're experiencing is okay and is acceptable. But what we're talking about is controlling the things we can control. As a child, we were unable to control, to think logically, to think rationally, to not blame ourselves for things that were essentially the fault of other people. We couldn't have been expected then as a young child with no world or life experience to think correctly, to frame things truthfully. But now as an adult, what you're saying is we've written a story as a child based on our experiences, blaming ourselves. The world's against us. Everyone's against us. It's because I'm not good enough. It's because I'm not lovable. It's because I can't cope. Those three lies. But we've now carried that story that we wrote as a child based on childlike logic, which was, of course, incorrect. We've carried that story with us. And as you say, everything we now experience in adult life runs through that filter. So are you saying we need to revisit this story and correct it?
Well, you said so much there, Alex. It was so powerful and so true. I hope you heard that, because blame is one of the things that the inner child really does. And this is not about blaming you or blaming the child. Certainly not about blaming your boss. This is about understanding. And again, we've done so many videos on what we call the inner child, this subconscious part of your mind. I love the term inner child. I love that metaphor. It's not perfect, but it allows you to speak to that part of your mind as if you were speaking to when you were 6, 7, 8, 9. This, to me, my work, this is the most influential time of your life. That gap, roughly about 3-5 years, around that time, because this is when you are forming your core beliefs, those very deep beliefs, those filters that you filter the work through. And please look back at our archives and listen to how you can go back doing the golden thread. But what you're doing is you're going back and you're reparenting. You're going back and finding that part of the mind. And I love the imagery of the inner child. If you can see yourself when you were around this age group, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and you see yourself as frozen, as locked in, as not understanding the world, not understanding how to deal, how to flow, how to be and live to your potential. This is your opportunity, and you can do this for yourself, to go back and sit and listen and educate that part of your mind that I'm calling the inner child. This is extremely powerful. And I would call it, this is spiritual. This is you doing something that your parents couldn't or wouldn't do. And this is you being responsible and accountable for doing it for yourself, to yourself, because you're worth it, because you do want to reach your potential, because you are valuable and you have worth. And that's what I call Shen. You have innate value and worth, and you respect and honor that. It doesn't matter if anybody else does, but it matters that you do. And this is what this work is about. And although we started talking about an emotional feeling of anger, which is very powerful and may be appropriate, you see when you do the work and follow the path down. I love what you said on one video. It's like that Hansel and Gretel following the breadcrumbs. You're following it down. You're following it down. You're asking why. Well, why do I do that? Well, why did I react in that way? Well, what's my belief on this? And why do I believe this? And those self-inquiry questions are extremely powerful because that's leading you down to the child. And I often say in these videos, when I work with a client, it's almost like we're going down cellar steps, down into a deep dungeon. And in the corner there, we see this beautiful golden child that's just there, stuck in the corner. And what we have to do, and if I'm part of it, I love this part of the work so much, we have to go and just sit with her, with him, and talk to them, listen to them. And I can tell you, the majority of my clients don't listen to their inner child. They try to push them down. They create feelings. And in my experience, I'm sorry to talk so much because this is really important. When you're experiencing these out of control emotions, this is normally your inner child trying to get attention, trying to get you to notice them, trying to get you to listen to them because they see injustice. And they don't understand about injustice. They don't understand that people have got their own problems. They just see it from their point of view. And this is why this work is so valuable and important.
And I think, David, though, from what I've heard you say is a lot of people teach anger management to, okay, be calm, breathing techniques, reframe, all the kind of top level stuff to how to deal with particular triggering situations. And what you're saying, actually, no, the more effective long-term fundamental strategy is to do the self-inquiry work, do the inner work, go back, do the inner child reparenting, because would you say 99% of the time people with reoccurring ongoing anger issues, it's rooted in childhood experiences and that story we wrote as a child?
I think you mentioned the big difference. Again, we're going to go back to the beginning. There's nothing wrong with anger. Anger at appropriate times is a wonderful emotion. I love it. It's great. There's nothing wrong with it. But if it's reoccurring, as Alex says, if it's overwhelming, if you're living your life being an angry person, if you call yourself an angry person, or you're living your life repressed anger and you're getting these pressure cooker that my client told me, there is something much deeper. There is something you have to go and find. And I would say typically, and obviously I attract these type of people, I understand this, but typically it goes right back to childhood. It goes right back to the foundation and the formation of your belief system, how you view the world, how you view people, how you believe people should treat you, how you believe that when people don't treat you fairly or justly, how you respond to that. And these are normally formulated very early in our childhood, around that period that after all my 45 years of experience, this period with 6 and 9-year-olds seems to be very relevant because this is the time when a child is understanding their emotions and maybe using their emotions to get what they want, but they haven't got the cognitive awareness of there are people in the world, and maybe people like their parents or their grandparents or their teachers who are not balanced, who are not the authority figures that you have to believe everything they say. And we've done so much work in the archives on this. So if this resonates with you, please go back into our archives, have a look at some of the inner child work, read the reparenting, how to speak to your inner child, how to have that conversation. These are very important because when clients come to me, this is what they don't. They don't listen. They don't respond. They don't give the teachings. They see themselves as a victim against the world.
Yeah, and I will put links in the show notes to more information on our inner child reparenting techniques, and also on the subject of triggers, which is very strongly related to this teaching topic on anger. So, David, I think we've talked about the idea of the inner child and ourselves, blaming ourselves, and then holding on to a kind of sense of injustice, resentment, expectation that everyone's against us. And we want to protect ourselves from that. And so the anger is kind of like a self-protection strategy. What about for clients who, when they get down and they speak to their inner child, they get down to their childhood experiences, they say, well, I can't think of anything that happened to me, but I know my mother was always very angry, very short-tempered, or my father was always very resentful, brooding, yang. We had to tiptoe around him in the house. Is there like a certain percentage of clients or individuals who are angry more often than not because it's like a copied behavioral thing?
Well, I think that's a good point, because there's been some research. I'm not, it's just off the top of my head. I think they call it mnemonics, coming from the Greek word mimicking. I think that's the word, but you could Google it. And I think the percentage they came to was around 75% of what children learn is not what you teach them, is what they mimic. They mimic from authority figures. And obviously the biggest authority figure in a child's life is their parent, their family life, their grandparents. And then they go to school, and it might be their teachers or the children in the next year, and they see how they cope with things. And then they mimic, they copy. And this is where it can go wrong. So you're absolutely right. If you've ever said, I'm just like my mother, or I'm just like my father, then you're just copying. And again, this goes against my model of being accountable, being responsible. You should be responsible. Don't copy other people. Think about, what do you believe? This is such a simple but powerful technique. Not what you feel. What do I believe? Why do I believe it? So go right down to that core belief. If it's one of the three lies that I hear almost of every client, and I've never heard anybody give me a good, solid reason for why they're not good enough. Even the statement doesn't make sense. I can't cope. When they're a coping expert, they've coped all through their lives. Or I'm unworthy. How can a child be unworthy? No child is born into this world without worth and value, what I call Shen. It's innate. It's who you are. And you're doubting the very core of who you are. And then the result, the consequence of that, will be the red light feelings. The one that we're talking about now is anger. But it could equally be anxiety, frustration, resentment. It could be anything, because it's telling you at the base of this, the base of the golden thread, there is something in your belief system that you need to address and look at. And this is just for you. No one else can change that belief, because it's your belief. And I want you to be responsible and accountable. I want you to believe in yourself as much as I believe into you. I want you to have no doubt, 100%, absolutely no doubt that you have Shen. You have innate value and worth. No one gives it to you. No one can take it away from you. And if you start from that basis, then your filter and the way you see the world will start to change. And maybe as you deal with the boss who's not very good, you will deal with her in a different way. And as you said, and we've done many, you'll be able to confront her, but with a calmness. And you'll be able to point out what she's doing wrong that's against your contract without going into your emotions. Imagine that. Imagine you walking into the boss's office, calm, shoulders dropped, breathing deeply, and addressing the issues that you need to address. Well, isn't that where you would want to be, in your flow?
And I guess before you get to that point of whether you confront in a calm, authentic, logical way, you've already done the inner filtering work about, okay, so how much I've noted that I've got this internal red light feeling now because of this situation. How much of this is to do with my stuff, my beliefs, if I'm blaming myself, if I'm blaming other people, and that's wrong. You do that kind of inner check with yourself, that check-in, and then the conclusion may be, no, this situation, this behavior of this other person is inappropriate. So now I'm empowered with the choice to I either confront or do I deal with it in a separate way?
Exactly.
But you are totally grounded, totally in control, navigating your journey, not letting your emotions pull you around.
And you said a word there which I want to emphasize: empowered. You are empowered. You will not be empowered being the victim of your emotion, whatever emotion. You create the emotion. The emotion might be appropriate, but you won't be empowered being the victim of that emotion and being scared, creating another feeling of scared of an emotion that you create. So you create one emotion, anger, and then you create another emotion, scared of the anger that you create. There's the circle. There's a carousel of despair, and you get caught in the circle. And then you can't even deal with a problem because you're caught in your own mental and emotional circle.
Wonderful, David. Well, we've covered a huge amount of ground there and many of the fundamental Wu Wei Wisdom teachings as well. As I said, I will put links in the show notes to related teachings to help you do this work. We hope you have enjoyed and benefited from this particular life lesson. Do let us know in the comments and perhaps share the teaching with someone else who you think may also benefit. David works one-to-one with clients all over the world every week via Zoom video call on exactly these sorts of issues. And I will put a link in the show notes to learn more about David's consultations. And finally, please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We produce new teachings every week and we would love to share your journey with you. Bye-bye.